Всім привіт! Today we'll be discussing the two methods of applying a tourniquet. Many of you guys think that there's only one correct way of applying a tourniquet, the one that goes high and tight. Today we'll be discussing the second one. Alright, so let's get down to it. The first method that we teach here is if you do not have time to assess the wound and if you do have time to assess the wound. Alright, so let's start with the most basic one. You have an injury right above your wrist. You don't have time to assess your limb to look for other injuries up and down your arm. It's a very chaotic situation and you just put it high and tight. That would be correct. Alright, so you put it high and tight all the way, just like most of you know. Okay, you don't want to put it horizontally, you want to put it as high as possible. You can turn the turnstile towards you a little bit so that you can twist it. I'm only going to twist it one time because this is a training tourniquet, and if I do it anymore, it'll just simply break. But in reality, you need to do it as tight as possible or as tight as a tourniquet will allow because that needs to stop the bleeding. Okay, next I will get rid of my Velcro so it doesn't catch on anything. So there will be no Velcro facing up at all. Alright, I'll put this white tab over it that says time. Okay, this right here is Velcro. I'm going to get rid of it. Alright, and then I'll get my pen or paper. I'll get my pen or Sharpie, okay? And I'm going to write down the time on the white tab. Okay, if you can't write it on the white tab, you can write it on your hand. Okay, especially if you only have a pen, it's easier to pull up on other parts of your body rather than this white material. Okay, so you didn't have time to assess the wound, you didn't have time to assess the limb, you just saw massive bleeding above your wrist and you applied it high and tight. That's the correct way to do it. All right, let's move on to the next way. Okay, so the second method is that if you do have time to assess your limb and the wound. So we'll use the same scenario. You have an injury that's massively bleeding above your wrist, okay? You are able to check the rest of your arm. You have time to assess the wound. You have time to assess the limb to see that this is the only injury that is on this limb. So then, because you probably will have an injured arm, you can use your teeth to open the Velcro. You can use your legs to open the Velcro. All right, anything that you can to get it open. All right, after that, you're going to go ahead and use the 4-finger method. If you're in the West, in America, you can use the 3 to 4 inch method. If you're in Europe, you can use the 7 to 10 centimeters. All right. Usually that's about the width of an adult palm. All right. So you put it above your wound, just like this. All right. And then you apply the tourniquet right there. Okay. And I'll explain to you why we do this. Okay. So my wound is right on the wrist. Let's say right here. Okay. 4 fingers above the wound, 3 to 4 inches, 7 to 10 centimeters. You apply the tourniquet just like if it was a high and tight position. Okay. Velcro on Velcro. Tight as possible. I'm only going to do it once because it's a training tourniquet. It will break if I do it anymore. Then I'm going to twist around the turnstile so that I can get rid of the Velcro so it does not catch on anything and come undone because we were trying to stop the bleeding. If it comes undone, the bleeding will continue. We don't want that. There's a little bit of Velcro here. You can bend it just like that. So there's no Velcro. Just like with the other one, get a marker, get a pen, write down the time. If this doesn't show up on the white pad, you can write it on your hand. All right, it's a lot easier to write it on your hand. All right, because it's important for when the medics come to get you. Now, this is also the correct way, okay? Because you had time to assess the wound. You had time to assess the arm and find that this is the only injury. Now, let me explain to you why that this is a correct way to do it, okay? So, let's say, for example, that you're not able to receive any medical attention for many, many hours, okay? All right, let's say in Ukraine, sometimes you're in a village, remote village, sometimes you don't have good medical services or emergency services, sometimes you have maybe a crappy road that's mud and vehicles get stuck in there. For whatever reason it is, you're not able to receive medical attention for many, many hours, okay? And so what happens when blood is cut off from a limb for that long? Sometimes the doctor has to amputate the arm. Okay, so let's just use the two methods as an example, okay? Let's say you do have massive bleeding above your wrist and you do have time to assess the wound. You have time to assess the limb and find that this is the only injury that you have. But if you apply the tourniquet high and tight for many, many hours, right? That means the blood flow will stop up here. That the rest of the limb will not receive any blood. And at the worst case scenario, the doctor will have to amputate your arm up here. Now, I don't know about you, I would like a little bit of arm rather than no arm. So this is why we use the second method. Mostly civilians use it. Soldiers normally do not use it because they're on the front lines. They don't have time to assess the wound. Later on, they can convert the tourniquet so they don't lose the limb. I get it. But for civilian use only, when you have time to assess the wound and the limb, 3 to 4 inches, 7 to 10 centimeters, or 4-finger palm method is also correct. Because I would rather lose a little bit of my arm, right, rather than my whole arm. And the doctor will amputate above where the tourniquet is, okay? So the lower you're able to do it, the better. Now, it's always better to do it higher than normal, but that doesn't mean high and tight, right? If you're unsure about the distance above the wound, you can always put it a little bit higher, okay? Just a little bit higher. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to put it high and tight. So that is why there's 2 methods. That's why our organization teaches that there are 2 methods. For soldiers, we always use the high and tight method and then teach them how to convert the tourniquet. For civilians, most of the time we don't have time to get to the letter that we need to convert the tourniquet. So we just teach M, massive bleeding, and we just teach them if you have time to assess the wound in the limb, put it 7 to 10 centimeters above the wound. If you don't, put it high and tight. So I hope you learned something today.